Violence in our hospitals is unfortunately a routine occurrence. There are on average 12 attacks a day on Queensland health staff. When the LNP came into office, it doubled the penalty for assaulting police to 14 years in jail. Today it's promised to do the same for anyone who assaults a doctor, nurse or paramedic. But will it solve the problem? I was joined in the studio earlier by Nurses Union State Secretary Beth Mohle. Beth Mohle, what do you think about the doubling of the penalty for assaulting doctors, nurses and paramedics?
Well, Matt, the Queensland Nurses Union certainly welcomes any increased focus on the unacceptable violence towards nurses, midwives and other health workers and the increasing of penalties. But what we're concerned about is that that won't do anything to prevent violence towards health workers, and that's what we should be focusing on.
Well, it seems like it's quite a common thing. In 2013-14, 2,817 nurses suffered what the Minister says was violence in the workplace. So that's roughly 8.5% of the workforce. Are you surprised that it's that common?
I'm not surprised indeed. I think that would be an underreporting. I think a lot of incidents don't get reported. It's a totally unacceptable level of violence, and it's something that we have been campaigning against for many, many years. Indeed, earlier this year we raised the matter with the Minister and with the Director-General, stating that we believe there needs to be a systemic review of the adequacy of control systems within Queensland Health. The department needs to be showing leadership on this issue. It's particularly important given that we've got 17 hospital and health services who are all off doing their own thing in relation to responses to violence. And there's a total inconsistency of approach, and there's been some really concerning issues that we've flagged with the DG and the Minister earlier this year.
So do you think, given that they're doubling the penalty, the maximum penalty to 14 years, will that deter people from assaulting health staff? It
may deter some people, and as I said, we certainly do welcome any advertising campaign that will alert to the public that it's totally unacceptable and there's a zero tolerance towards violence towards health workers. That is welcomed. It is of concern, though, that it really won't do anything to stop the violence. In a lot of the cases, for example, in many instances, the patients may not be competent. They may be demented or they may have other issues, which will mean they'll never see a prosecution. So a vast majority of cases fall into that category now, and that's why we need to take a really close look at it. And we have offered to work with Queensland Health on this issue, but so far that offer has been rejected. So that's meant that we contacted the Auditor-General to ask him to do a review into the adequacy of Queensland Health's response, because the Victorian Auditor-General had done a similar report in recent times and found that there's a real lack of leadership in this area.
Yeah, just before I move on to that, can you just give people an idea of what is a typical assault in a health workplace?
Matt, it could be anything. I mean, people get punched, they get spat on, they get verbally abused. It's a whole gamut. Indeed, we've seen some very, very serious assaults this year where a nurse had a fractured eye socket. Another one got very, very severe head injuries. So it runs the whole gamut. As I said, a lot of these cases, indeed, just a couple of weeks ago, we were out in West Moreton where we were speaking to members about a particular management problem with a patient with dementia, and a significant number of our members have been assaulted out there. So we're working with local management to try to prevent that from happening. But in that particular instance, there's a unit in another hospital and health service that actually deals with those types of patients and puts them on particular treatment plans. That now is very difficult for that to happen because it's two different hospital and health services. It's not one system. So as I said, it's a complex issue, and we really do want to work with government to address this because it's totally unacceptable. It is growing and it has to stop.
Are you seeing an increase in certain types of assaults from people suffering from drug affliction, meth or alcohol-induced violence?
Yes, that certainly is the case, that there is an element of that, particularly in emergency departments, and we do note the safe sober centres that have been established, and we've got some concerns about that we have flagged with government in terms of how that whole process has been set up. But as I said, it's just one element of that.
Why is that? Because what will there be nurses with police officers in those sober centres?
Yes, we're working through that, and we believe that we're just really keen to ensure that it doesn't transfer a problem to another area, away from EDs into another area. But we're working through that issues, and we've actually sort of visited the centre and the like, so we've raised our concerns, and we're hopeful that our concerns have been addressed. But we just don't want to see knee-jerk reactions, because you don't want to transfer a problem from one area to another area.
Now, the police had the same situation 2 years ago. The incoming LNP government doubled the maximum penalty to 14 years for assaulting a police officer. I was speaking to the police union today and they said the main concern was that no one gets the maximum penalty anyway, and so the deterrent value isn't there. They want a mandatory minimum sentence. Do you have that sort of concern? Well,
it certainly is of concern that is only one very small element of this whole picture. It is really, as I said before, it's putting the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff rather than putting a fence at the top of the cliff to stop these incidents from happening. So it is an important element of it, but really very, very small number of cases see it to court from our members' perspective because of the issues that I've raised before. So the much bigger problem is preventing the violence happening in the first place.
And this is this audit you were talking about earlier on that happened in Victoria. What did they find there and what can you transpose to Queensland?
They found there that there was an inconsistency of approach between the different hospitals there and that there was a lack of coordination and that we really do need to show leadership from a whole health system perspective, which is why we wanted to have the review done in Queensland.
All right, Beth Mohle, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Matt.